Say goodbye to all your pain and sorrow. Say goodbye to all those lonely nights. Say goodbye to all your blue tomorrows. Now you're standing in the light. I know sometimes you feel so helpless. Sometimes you feel like you can't win. Sometimes you feel so isolated. You'll never have to feel that way again. You are not alone. You're not alone. I never thought I'd find the road to freedom. Never thought I'd see you smile again. Never thought I'd have the chance to tell you that I will always be your friend. You are not alone. You're not alone.
Thank you. You may be seated. I welcome everybody here today, friends, family, and all the different ways that people knew Pat. I'll introduce myself. I'm Barry Jr. There's already been lots of confusion. So Barry Sr. is my dad and Pat's partner. This was quite a sudden loss. We were actually on the way up to Camrose last week when Dad called. We were here for a different funeral, and I don't know if any of you had the same reaction, but we were in disbelief. We couldn't. It couldn't be real. It just was so sudden, and it seems you look. This wasn't a thing years ago, but do you go back to your texts and you see the last, like I just got to, we just texted. It wasn't that long ago, and it's kind of crazy that you can go back, not just in your memory, but on your phone to your conversations. So today, I know Pat, she would want this day, she never liked things getting too heavy, She wanted to have fun. She also didn't like people making a great big fuss. So we'll try to be ourselves today and just celebrate. I've often thought this at celebrations of life or funerals. It's a strange thing that happens. You see people having lunch afterwards, and you hear a lot of laughter. And at the same time, sometimes I see people like tears coming out of their eyes, and they're laughing at the same time. I think this is the strangest, most wonderful emotion, that we're happy and sad at the same time. The family has picked out 2 verses, and I'm going to read those. They'll kind of set the stage for our time together. So the first verse is from Psalms 34, and it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And the second verse from Romans chapter 14. "If we live to the Lord, and if we die to the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord." So I'm going to kind of review our program a little bit here. Pretty soon, we're going to have Derek come up for the eulogy, and then there's a poem on the back of your program. After the eulogy, I'll be reading that to you. That was written by a family member, and some special music, a slideshow, and a little message and a closing prayer. I'm actually not, it says I'm going to read it there, but I'm not. The obituary is in the program. You can take a look at that yourself. And yeah, with that said, I'd invite Derek. You can come on up. And Derek, how are you? You're younger than a nephew, maybe. You're a nephew, okay.
Nephew. And I prepared this today here, so bear with me as we try to make it through it. So good morning and welcome, everyone. I was asked to take on this role of honoring Auntie Pat today. That's how I'll be referring to her for the duration of the time up here. I'll be telling some stories and memories of her, and these were all contributed by various people here. Before I get going too far, though, I'll take a minute and say thanks to everyone for coming out today. I know Auntie Pat's watching and appreciates this. Also, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Thirsk family for the gifts of food, phone calls, texts and notes and tributes on the wall. This has meant a lot to us over the past week. Some inside information, as Sam had kind of alluded to already. Auntie Pat had said on numerous occasions that she didn't want a sad funeral. It should be pizza and beer, she'd say. But side note, she never was a beer drinker. She just liked to pretend to be. She'd bring a case to a family function and maybe have 3/4 of a beer and leave the rest. The pizza part, well, you'll see throughout today's stories that she was a big fan of pizza. She wasn't, however, a fan of egg salad sandwiches at funerals, so we'll see if those are here today. If they are, the rest of us like them, and we'll have the beer and pizza another time. Auntie Pat was adopted into the most wonderful home she could have asked for. She grew up on a farm near Kelsey and attended Rosen School. Being the youngest of 5 children, it was reported to me that she was spoiled. However, she apparently had a slightly different memory than this and would deny it all the time. Mom recalls one specific memory of singing a song at Grandpa and Grandma's 25th wedding anniversary. She was 8 and Auntie Pat was 4. Mom was wearing a dress with some smaller openings in the sleeves. And partway through the song, Auntie Pat decided to turn towards her and started poking her little fingers in her and tickling her, which infuriated Mom. And she isn't entirely sure how the song went, but she figures she made it through it. Her brothers, being a few years older than her, always found her actions cute. Mom did not. Apparently, they never got along all that well until they were in their later teens. This was likely due to the age gap, but nevertheless, plenty of notes were passed back and forth under their bedroom doors. I'm not sure what the notes said, but I know what the notes I would have wrote to my siblings would have said. So thankfully, that all changed as they grew older, and they became the best of friends. She became a great listener and a sounding board who helped Mom think things through. One thing I always remember Auntie Pat talking about was how special it was for her to have a big brother on television. You see, while Uncle Theo was away at university, she always thought she was able to tune in and see what he was up to along with his friends, Casey and Finnegan, and see what was coming out of that magic tickle trunk for the day. Following her graduation in 1980, she moved from the farm to Red Deer to start a new chapter of her life where she made lifelong friends and many memories. She bought a house in West Park, which happened to be close to Red Deer College, so maybe she didn't know it at the time, but this would mean that by default, she would be the house that was volunteering her basement for all the nieces and nephews to attend school there. It was always fun visiting her there at that house, too. The neighbors even had an outdoor pool that you couldn't use. She did have a great playground just through the back alley, and she'd go over there with us. And she also offered cable television when we only had 3, 5, and 13. She'd take us around Red Deer to the outdoor pool, Bower Ponds for pedal boat rides, Arby's, which was awesome back then, and to both the malls. We'd rent movies from the West Park store, and in the evenings, we'd order in pizza. One time when we were there, someone stuck his head through the legs of the kitchen table, and his head became lodged. And it wasn't me, but it was someone else here who's got an equally large melon. Anyway, as panic set in, the screaming started, and Dad came rushing in to see what was going on. Upon observing Auntie Pat and Mom frantically trying to pry his head free, Dad calmly walked over to the table and slid the 2 halves apart to let the leaf out. The leaf is Bryce. Eventually, that house would be sold without anyone knowing, as she decided to sell it privately and tackle the sale herself. Then it was back to the farm. Always a trendsetter, when she'd show up to Grandpa and Grandma's house for family functions, she'd be fashionably late in her Trans Am, later a Firebird. All of us kids thought that was pretty cool, and we'd rush to meet her. She'd have a stack of Garfield comic books, and a stack of Garfield comic books that she'd taken out from the school library for us to read and show us the new additions to her ever-growing teddy bear collection that she so loved. She was also an original Apple fangirl long before Apple was a huge success like it is today. She'd have her Mac ready to go and go head-to-head with anyone on a Windows machine to defend it. We liked to stay up late and watch Saturday Night Live with her. She'd then go on to introduce us to reruns of SCTV with John Candy and Martin Short as Ed Grimley. She loved playing that auntie role. Birthday and Christmas cards would show up for nieces and nephews, and they always included scratch tickets that we each hope would reveal us as the big winner. I'm not exactly sure how many of us ended up living with her, but I know that she definitely made a sacrifice doing that, as she did enjoy living alone in her alone time. And then she did it over and over and over again. She would buy the extra good groceries that we couldn't afford, whip up some home-cooked meals, and treat us to make us feel special. Kim recalls that when she lived in Red Deer, Auntie Pat always offered to pick her up from the bar if she needed a ride. No matter what time, the offer always came with the caveat that she'd be very grumpy when you called and woke her up, and then in the end, she was always happy you called for a ride. So everyone else, I don't know, that apparently failed and flopped because that was not in place when I was there. So I don't know who ruined it or if you were the final one, Kim, or what, but it didn't exist when I was there, but nice to know it did. When she moved back to the farm in 2015 to the house she grew up in, Uncle Theo and Auntie Margot got to fixing up the house and doing some renovations. She was very appreciative of this and always bragged about her new towel warmer in the bathroom. I believe it as landlords, they'd even go so far as to come over and get the bat out of the house if she left it open when she would go for a smoke. Since she was back on the farm, she felt she should do some farm-like things, so she headed to an auction. She started bidding on a lot and ended up winning a potato racer. When the auctioneer asked if she wanted the whole box, she gave a nod. And she thought she scored a home run, just a little fist bump there. And then when she went to collect, she found out she bought the whole box, each for $8. Those racers would go on to become some good gifts, but I do not have one, so if there is one that we find in a box somewhere, I still mash the old way. So I'll take one if we have it. She loved being around the hustle and bustle of the farm, especially at harvest. She liked taking food out to the field. Pizza and popcorn were a couple of her favorite things, and just to take out and see everyone. She liked to climb up and go for a ride every once in a while, too. One Christmas Eve, as we headed into church, those keen country eyes spotted a wondrous sight in the field. "Look at that," she said from the back seat. "Look at all those deer in the field over there. They're all spaced out and still. There's so many." The rest of us squinted to see what she saw in the moonlight that night. All we saw was a field full of bales with snow on them. As we pointed this out to her, she realized what she had said and went into the famous Auntie Pat laugh with a ha! Now, you probably are hearing it different in your head. I'm not a singer. We have different timbres in our voice. But you can, I'm sure, hear that laugh that she would have. You don't get a bigger Oilers hockey fan than Auntie Pat, as you can see here today. You'd frequently find her in her Oilers jersey, complete with puck head, foam finger, and the whole shebang. One cold day on November 22nd, 2003, she decided to strike out on her own and head to the Heritage Classic outdoor hockey game to see her Edmonton Oilers make history playing against the Montreal Canadiens. It was the first NHL game to be played outdoors as part of regular season play and came with a wind chill of minus 30. But that was okay because she wore all the outdoor clothes we could find. She was like one of those little Russian doll sets, a little peanut in the middle. And she was layered so thick, I don't even think she could bend her limbs. Once suited up, it was out the door and off to with an escort to the LRT. And that's where Bryce explained to her how to ride the LRT. And eventually ended up with, you know what, just get off when everyone else wearing Oilers stuff gets off. She had a wonderful time and bragged all about it when she returned. She loved the outdoors and enjoyed having a bonfire with a roasted hot dog. So much so that she put an axe on her wish list so that she could chop her own wood. No one agreed with that. The idea was struck. It was vetoed, not on the list. One time, since she loved the mountains so much, she ventured out on her own for a time of reflection and solitude, away from it all. As she packed up her campsite one day, a big gust of wind came along and blew her tent away. She simply shrugged it off, sat down, opened a beverage, and waved goodbye to it. The trip ended quickly, or at least the camping portion did. There was always a spot in her heart for animals. Along with having her own cats, Kelsey, the one we probably best remember, she also took in Mo, an outdoor farm cat that hit the jackpot when she got to move in to the lap of luxury with Auntie Pat. As with all lives, there was a rocky section that struck Auntie Pat as she fought with diabetes. During the COVID pandemic, she had to spend a lengthy period in the hospital and ended up having to have her leg amputated. Shortly after she had received her prosthetic leg, she was unsure how to explain this to Raylan and Elena. But one day, Elena spied her with a leg in her hand, putting it on. Now, I remember myself as a kid seeing someone pull their thumb off, and that was one thing, but this is another level. So Elena's next question to Auntie Pat was a very inquisitive, "So you're made of cardboard?" Which incited that Auntie Pat laugh again and sent her roaring. Unfortunately, about a year later, the other leg had to go as well, and she adjusted the best anyone could, but the bad news came when she found she would not be returning to the farmhouse and would be required to move to a place in Bashaw, Alberta with wheelchair access. And I believe at this time she called it Bashaw. But out of the darkness comes light, and this is where our hero comes into the story, because Barry Oram came in. And he turned terrible old Bashaw into Bashaw. Just about made it. Anyway, that was her way to spice up the sophisticated town. A special glow came upon her from that day forward. They had their first date August 25th, 2022. They went for a drive out to the lake to enjoy the outdoors, get some crossword puzzles in and talk. It was a great day that they both enjoyed. But when it was time to go, well, he went to bring the car around. Barry parked Auntie Pat at the crest of the hill in her wheelchair overlooking the lake to soak it all in before he headed back to town. As he was walking away, he happened to turn back when he heard a shriek, just in time to see her starting her descent down the hill towards the lake with gravity and inertia kicking in with each bump. She hit the mucky reeds at the water's edge and stopped the chair abruptly, but that launched her into the air like a lawn dart. And she landed in the mud, buried mid-thigh, and this is without feet, mind you. Barry quickly sprung into action and went into recovery mode, rescuing her from her precarious position as they laughed and laughed. Now, I later learned in talking to Barry that years ago he was involved in gymnastics and teaching. That's when I put it all together, that he must have been not able to scratch that itch, and he just was testing her. And I don't blame him. He needed to make sure she not only liked sports, but had some athleticism too. They became inseparable and did everything together. They had the same hobbies and interests, including puzzles and trivia, that they would bring to family get-togethers to test our knowledge. They both loved sports and the Oilers, and they both had a great sense of humor, and they would frequently put that on display. Barry fit right in and was quickly welcomed into the family with his caring attitude. He would do anything for her. He'd be the one that committed to spending all his time taking Auntie Pat back and forth every few days for her dialysis appointments in Red Deer and later Wetaskiwin, rain or shine, deepening their relationship. They would eventually get a custom license plate for Barry's vehicle that simply read Thor 25. The TH from Thirsk, the OR from Orem, and the 25 from their first date. So here we are today, left with the wonderful memories of a wonderful person who touched us all in her special way. You will be missed. Until we meet again, Auntie Pat.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate the work and thought you put into that. I'm going to invite the musicians to start coming up, and while they do, I'm going to read a poem that's on the back of your program. And this was written by Callista. I'm not sure if I've met Callista or if she's the kind of person. No, there. Didn't know if she'd put up her hand. And I thought this was perfect. I think you'll enjoy this, but I think Pat would enjoy this more than anybody. It says, to compare your life to hockey would surely make you pleased. I only wish that you were here to share your expertise. Acquired by Team Thirsk and loyal you would stay. You always offered up your best and in turn improved each play. If by chance we got offside, you'd be there to help us out Your love for us was clear, and of this we have no doubt. Now the referee should have called tripping when life brought you all your trials. But you were strong and carried on and lived your life with smiles. It seems we've hit intermission and you aren't able to finish this game. Without you here, it just seems wrong, and we know nothing will be the same. I hope you're up in heaven, cheering for us all, until the big game ends for us and we answer God's last call. By Callista. Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you to the family for giving us this honor. Life is easy when you're up on the mountain and you've got peace of mind like you've never known. When things change and you're down in the valley, don't lose faith, for you're never alone. And the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, He'll make them right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God in the night. We talk of faith when we're up on the mountains, but talk comes easy when life's at its best. But in the valley of trials and temptations, that's when faith is really put to the test. And the God on the mountains is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, He'll make them right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God in the night. And the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. When things go wrong, He'll make them right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. The God of the day is still God in the night. The God of the day is still God in the night.
There are places I remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone and some remain. All these places have their moments with lovers and friends I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. dancing up the ocean, running fast along the sand. The spirit born of earth and water, fire flying from your hands. In the instant that you love someone, in the second that the hammer hits, reality runs up your spine, and the beast is finally fed. And all I ever needed was the one, like freedom feels where wild horses run. When stars collide, like you and I, those shadows blot the sun. You're all I ever needed, baby, you're the one. There are caravans we follow, drunken nights and dark hotels, when chances breathe between the silence, where sex and love no longer jail. Oh, for each man in his time is Cain, until he walks along the beach and sees his future in the water, a long-lost heart within his reach. And all I ever needed was the one, like freedom feels where wild horses run. When stars collide, like you and I, no shadows block the sun. You're all I've ever needed. Ooh, baby, you're the one.
I'm not sure what stood out to you the most, but for me, it was her smile. I didn't know her when she was younger, so to see even those pictures of her before she was an adult, and she has that little bit of pole on the one side, especially when she was being a bit cheeky. And another just kind of a clarification, she was holding a sign that said Barry's 50th. That was my 50th. My dad hasn't been 50 for a very long time. I did want to talk about faith, probably for two different reasons. One, our faith is what gives us comfort in times like this. But the other is because faith was important to Pat, and I don't know. I don't know how open she was with friends and family. But I know that this is something that was in her from a young age, and she kept, and she would talk to us about, and so it was a treat. I'm going to reread the verse. As we were just kind of reflecting on her life, we find comfort in this verse. Again, Psalm 34, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. This is good news. And in times like this, when you lose somebody, it's important to remember that, because if you think back to other things, the dark days are always temporary. That's the truth. The dark days are always temporary. Maybe it's days, maybe it's weeks, maybe it's months. But the dark days are always temporary. God is near to us in this moment, especially as we mourn somebody that meant so much to us. Though we grieve, we also know that Pat is now in the presence of the Lord, resting in his peace and surrounded by his love. Pat had a big love for family and friends. It was evident in the way she showed up for them, and you can see just how many family events she attended, and that was true on our side. Anytime there was a graduation, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Pat was there. She had a beautiful ability to make others feel welcome, and if things got awkward or anything like that, she quickly would lighten the mood, either by giving a joke or actually sometimes perspective. Pat's laughter was a constant reminder that fun could be found even in difficult times. In recent years, God provided a partner in our life, my dad. Dad and Pat shared many meals, puzzles, hockey games, jokes, shopping trips, and as was mentioned, many, many miles on the road. They shared many moments of beautiful companionship, and I mean that, to watch them. It was just a beautiful thing. It just made you happy for me to see my dad happy and to see Pat happy. And Dad, I know that you were great help to Pat, and she cared for you very deeply, and I know that you loved her very much. Pat's bond with her siblings and their families was also something she cherished. She spoke of you guys often, so many stories. It was often hard to keep track of who was who. Actually, and Val, yesterday I called her and just explained to me again how everybody's related. And she loved talking about all of you. We heard a lot of stories. The other thing I thought about, of course, I never got to meet Pat's parents, but just by getting to know Pat, I can only imagine that Pat's mom and dad must have been pretty special people, because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. They must have been some pretty cool people. I want to acknowledge that there were challenges. Life's not, sometimes, during these times we just talk about all the good times. Diabetes was a very unfriendly foe. And, she always had a good attitude, but that could not have been easy. Through all those hard times, and, it's in those hard times, and this is a hard time. This can be one of those times where we ask God, like, why? Why do I have diabetes and somebody else does not? And, why am I losing a loved one today? It can be really challenging on our faith. It inspires me that Pat kept on all the way through. And in another verse in Corinthians, this is 2 Corinthians 12, it says, "But he said to me, my grace," this is God's grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. I think Pat understood this truth. Her faith, though quiet and humble, was steady and firm. She trusted in God's grace, even when things weren't easy. And her ability to laugh through her struggles was a testament to her strength and the power of God's grace in her life. Though Pat wasn't always somebody to speak loudly, as far as I know, at our house about her faith, it was always present. I never heard her preach, but I know that she liked to pray. It was a gift to our family. So it's just crazy because I remember the first time my dad texted me and said, "We're praying for you." Well, this was new. This isn't. I think Pat's the one that taught Dad to pray. And actually, my last text from my dad, because I was in a small car accident less than a week before Pat passed, and the last text I had from them was, "We're sending up lots of prayers for you." And I'll miss her presence, but I'll miss that. She was always reminding us that she was taking time at meal times, different times, to be praying for us. Her faith was simple but real. She trusted God even when her circumstances were tough. And that trust gave her peace, strength, and courage to keep going. So as we remember Pat, we find comfort in the truth that she is now with her Savior. 2 Corinthians 5:8, "To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Though we miss her presence, we know that she is now in the arms of the Lord, free from pain and suffering, and enjoying the eternal peace he promised." I know we were doing some visiting, and there's a lot of other imagining going on about what else, if you could watch Oilers and all that sort of stuff. But probably the biggest piece is when you get to heaven and you're in the presence of the Lord, you get to ask all those questions and you get to get answers. That's wonderful for Pat. Pat's life was a reminder to us all to find fun in life and hold on to the peace that comes from trusting God. Romans 14:8, which we read before at the beginning, "Whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. This truth is our hope. While we'll miss Pat deeply, we know that she belongs to the Lord. One day, when our earthly journeys are over, we will be reunited. One day when our earthly faith journeys are over, we will be reunited with her in his presence, where there will be no more pain, no more suffering, and someday, no more goodbyes." I just want to close our time in prayer, and I so badly want the Lord to sort of replace what we've lost, but I know that's not how it works. I think it is important actually to let grief do its job. Grief seems like such a horrible thing, and being up here and trying not to cry and all those things, and yet it serves a purpose. And like I said at the beginning, sometimes we're crying and laughing at the same time. But I don't think there's a shortcut here. I don't think it's that we instantly get something back. I think it's normal and natural just to mourn the loss and let that happen. I think that's healthy for us. I hope in the process it helps us be thankful for Pat. I hope it also helps us to live, that we'd be inspired by her, and not live in the future, but in the present, because we have loved ones around us, and to be reminded that not to waste our days, and also just to be reminded to not worry so much, to make a joke and relax and trust the Lord that we're in His hands. So with that, let's pray. Brokenhearted, Pat is now in your presence, free from suffering, filled with your peace. We look forward to the day when we can be reunited with her. And until then, we know that you are with us, comforting us and guiding us through our grief. In Jesus' name, we all pray. Amen. So I think Colin's going to come help, and we'll bring the family out. And after that, you can see now, magically, that wall just disappeared. There's going to be food and refreshments, and we'd love it if you would stick around and come say hi and visit and give some hugs.